Vocalist performing your favorite songs with the full power of the Utah Symphony. Get your tickets for the Pops Concert Series at utahsymphony.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, chilly with a north breeze coming in for the weekend. Today's high 54, then tomorrow only 46. Lows dip into the 20s on Sunday and Monday. And right now we're at 48 degrees with sunny skies. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Yesterday, the U.S. military carried out airstrikes on Iran-backed militia groups in Syria. The attack came in response to the militia groups targeting U.S. ships and bases in Syria and Iraq. The question beyond the headlines is what comes next in all of this? Will these attacks on U.S. targets increase? Will escalation continue? Where does it lead? So let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Yesterday, Iran's foreign minister made this very stunning warning to America during a UN gathering regarding the war between Israel and Hamas.
I say frankly to the American statesmen who are now managing the genocide in Palestine that we do not welcome to expansion of the war in the region. But if the genocide in Gaza continues, they will not be spared from this fire.
So again, that was yesterday, the Iranian foreign minister at the UN gathering issuing a stern warning to the United States and others. And so we want to continue to break down what is going on beyond just the headlines there in a very difficult region. And one of our favorite people to turn to get that perspective, Behnam Bentaleblu, senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he focuses on Iranian security and political issues. And Behnam, welcome back to the program.
Pleasure to be back with you. Thank you so much.
So give us kind of your top-line assessment in terms of where we are. Obviously, these U.S. military airstrikes yesterday in Syria and Iraq. Give us some sense of what those were. What were they in response to?
Sure. So the U.S. has now for the first time used force since the October 7 terrorist attack by Hamas, but against a storage depot in Syria linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Shia militias that own and control the facility and go back and forth between the Iraq border. These Shia militias, at the behest, at the green lighting of Tehran, based on open source reporting, have struck U.S. facilities in Iraq and Syria anywhere from 12 to 16 times since that October 7 terrorist attack, and Iran's aim has been to try to divert U.S. political attention and resources away from standing with Israel as they're considering their military options against Hamas in Gaza, and to try to raise the risks of a wider regional confrontation, risks that were just heard when you played the clip from Iran's foreign minister at the UN the other day, threatening to drag America in. And Iran is basically quite cognizant, both at the administration-wide, Biden administration, and nationally with the debate in America about the risk aversion and desire to be done with Middle East, and it's trying to play up those fears about escalation just to get America offside.
And it always seems to me that the part of the strategy with many of these groups is to get America on its back foot or functioning from a defensive crouch, wanting to de-escalate at any cost or to avoid widening conflict at any cost. Walk us through that in terms of how should the U.S. be navigating those kinds of threats and these kinds of attacks, again, often as a way to carry out a different purpose?
Well, actually here, some might say it's a new normal or a restoration of that which we've seen. And I mean that because the Biden administration has actually previously used force against Iran-related and Shia militia group-related targets in Syria. It's done so actually more times than the Trump administration, even though it's had a softer Iran policy. The fundamental quandary there is it has not responded against the point of origin of many of these attacks, which is Iraq. So it's had a free fire in Syria, but, restrain and absorb the escalation in Iraq. And this has led to, instead of a signal of resolve against the Iranians and the militia network, this has ended up sending a signal of irresolution. And the Iranians feel like they're going to be pushing on a bit more of an open door. So if I had to guess here, I would say past this prologue, the Iranians are connecting the dots between American risk aversion and risk tolerance. And you're likely going to see more of these indirect fire attacks, particularly from drones and rockets at bases where U.S. forces are co-located. And the strategy is set to continue, and the Iranians are about to receive the ball and put the ball back into our court.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I love the fact that you connected the last two administrations, the current administration with the Biden administration, the previous with the Trump administration. And in many ways, there weren't a lot of differences. In many ways, the Biden administration had been stronger in action, softer on rhetoric. And to me, that's always an interesting and a delicate dance in terms of how you go about those. But it's not something we often think about. We think we know what the policy is or what a certain administration is doing, because we think we know what their politics is. This is a really good example of what's happening underneath the headlines, often being more important than the headlines themselves. And so take us to the next step now in terms of the ball being back in their court. I know many from the Defense Department have said, what happens next will really be a decision made in Tehran, not here in the U.S.
Well, you can clearly see the ball is being passed back and forth and back and forth. But just to add one more footnote to that conversation, even though quantitatively or number-wise there were less strikes by the Trump administration, it was done in places where it would communicate risk tolerance and more resolve to the Iranians. So in a place like Iraq, basically the U.S. cares about the domestic politics of Iraq, doesn't seem to care about that vis-a-vis Syria because of the civil war situation there. So the political cost of using a military tool is much higher in Iraq versus Syria. So again, it's both the tool, the military tool, the number of times it's used, the quality or the way in which it's used against the target, the geography of where it is used, and then how the adversary sees these things and connects the dots. So you are right to point about the dissonance between politics, policy, rhetoric, and reality. And just to drive that last point home about rhetoric, I think it would have been good, even if the U.S. was desiring to do as it did now, to strike in a very limited fashion, to not put out such a highly caveated press release right after by Secretary of Austin from the DOD, basically saying that this was highly retaliatory, this was exceptionally limited, that this was legal, that this was only against storage facilities. It sets in motion the potential for graduated escalation if Iran wants to push back. But that language handicaps, in fact, in my view, drowns out the military reality by signaling, again, that political irresolution. So when you're trying to send a deterrent message, sometimes less can be more. When it's too explanatory, in this case, I think it was explanatory for an American audience who is rightly concerned about not letting things get out of control in the Middle East. That it's funny that your domestic politics impedes your foreign signaling.
Yeah. Oh, that is so fascinating. And I'd love to take an hour and unpack just the things you just shared, because the words have meaning and the meaning matters, and the messages that we're sending, both in terms of action and in terms of rhetoric, really do add up over time, and they often inhibit the actual achievement of the objective in a lot of these cases, and we get so lost in all of that. Sometimes we go one direction, and by trying to say nothing, we say a whole lot, and sometimes we say a whole lot, and it would have been far better to just let the actions speak for themselves.
Absolutely.
And so let me ask you, as we wind down, I want to connect one more dot in all of this, and that is far away from the Middle East, but a dot directly connected in all of this is Russia. We know that Iran has been providing particularly the drone component there for their battle and their incursion into Ukraine. Give us some sense in terms of what's going on inside of Iran in terms of the connection to Russia, and how the current conflict in the Middle East is starting to splash over into Ukraine and beyond.
Well, as Iran has been able to surge drones and drone components, some of which have Western and foreign technology in them, to Russia for Russia's offensive against Ukraine now. There's probably going to be another winter offensive with these unmanned aerial systems striking civilian targets and critical infrastructure. the collapse, and many may not have noticed this during the war, but on October 18th, the collapse of UN missile prohibitions against the Islamic Republic, prohibitions that were designed to impede or render illegal ballistic missile tests and ballistic missile transfers, means that Tehran may soon provide short-range ballistic missiles to Russia to complement those suicide drones they've already given Russia. And Russia could use these more effectively against Ukraine. And what that buys Iran is it upgrades Iran in the eyes of Russia from junior partner to mid-level partner. And even though these folks cooperated in Syria, they had some tactical differences. The more their partnership deepens in different geographies, the more they can expect to benefit from one another. And in any resolution, be it in the UN General Assembly or in the Security Council, that Iran is going to be brought up, you can expect the Russians to weigh in on Iran's behalf. I mean, we've been seeing that in real time now with different draft texts and things put forward in the aftermath of the October 7 Hamas terror attack.
Wow, fantastic analysis and insight, as always. Behnam Bentaleblu, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And we so appreciate you taking time for us on a Friday and, as always, giving us a deep dive into what's really happening and what it all means moving forward. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you, sir.
Behnam Bentaleblu from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And you're going to need to go back and listen to the podcast if you missed any portion of that segment. And even if you heard the whole thing, I've already made some notes for myself to go back because there were so many nuanced components that Behnam was putting together for us as you look at very complicated, very interconnected places in the world, what's going on in terms of words, what's going on in terms of action, what it means in terms of politics, what it means in terms of policy at home and abroad. It's connecting all the dots, and you're not going to get that from just the headlines. And we'll continue to do that here on Inside Sources. We'll step aside, more coming up. Stick around.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Colder weather is on the way.
Get those sweaters and jackets ready. Get the sprinklers winterized.
And storms, too.
We've got a chance for another storm to bring in a little bit more rain.
We have you covered as the seasons change. Stay updated with traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the 9s. Mornings and afternoons on KSL News Radio.
Have you Googled yourself lately? Are there negative posts from an ex-employee or from a former client? Maybe an outdated news article, or sensitive personal information about your family. Search engines don't always get it right. For right or wrong, it's your reputation on the line. That's where Reputation Defender by Norton comes in. One of the most trusted names in online reputation repair, Reputation Defender has been fixing people's search results for over 15 years. Their cutting-edge approaches help you to wipe away unwanted information in your search results. They also promote the good stuff, so that it rises to the top, helping you put your best foot forward. Your good name is too valuable to leave to the whims of a Google algorithm. Take control with Reputation Defender. You can start by getting your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 800-401-6681 to speak to an expert. That's 800-401-6681.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. Its powerful technology actively finds and invites qualified candidates to apply to your job. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
You know, teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
Yeah, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, anything, you need to tell an adult, someone you know and trust. That can be hard, but speaking up about a problem is what helping a friend is all about.
For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Tim and Amanda, Utah's Morning News.
Trust is more important in our business, Tim, than it's ever been in my lifetime, in all of my many years of being here at KSL, because there's so much misinformation out there. And there's so much information that is heavy laden with opinion. When you come to us in the morning, what you get is the news. You get what's happening without a lot of spin or opinion and without any misdirection. That's just the pure, simple thing that you get.
When you talk about the misinformation that's out there, which there is, sometimes those stories just change from one morning to the next. And so hopefully you feel like each day as new information becomes available or we learn new things. This was certainly true during the pandemic. This is the place where we're going to share that information with you and talk about the things that are going to most affect your life.
Wake up with Utah's Morning News with Tim and Amanda between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Provo police have arrested a suspect in a fatal hit-and-run accident. Second, there's a new scam on social media targeted at Republican voters. They're being told to update their registrations. And third, 2 counties in Maine are still being told to shelter in place as the search continues for the suspect in Wednesday's mass shootings. Right now, sunny and 48 degrees in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, now that there is actually a speaker in the People's House, the work of the House of Representatives can begin again. Speaker Mike Johnson has canceled the in-state work period or recess period for members for the next 2 weeks. I actually thought that was a pretty strong signal. Again, whether you have decided you already hate Mike Johnson or you already love Mike Johnson, I will give the new Speaker of the House credit for saying, we're going to go to work. In fact, you're not going to get your recess or your in-state work period for the next 2 weeks because we have work to do. I think that's actually a good thing. And while I think it has already caused a little bit of the ruffling of feathers in Washington on both the Democratic and the Republican side of the aisle to say, wait a minute, you mean we have to reschedule our schedules? We have to stay here in Washington, D.C.? It's a good thing. I think the American people actually cheered when he said that because they're going to get to work. And obviously one of the things that they have to get to work on, something that we will follow very closely over the next 20 days, all the way until November the 17th, when the government needs to be funded once again. And they are on the path, and away they go. And so let's take a look and do a little preview as we roll into the weekend for some things that you can be watching for as we get into the week next week. So during an interview last night, the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, was asked how he plans to keep the Republican conference together going into these heavy-duty, high-stakes budget negotiations.
You know, when you get into the negotiations in the conference committee, the Speaker of the House and the leader of our party has to have a strong hand. And so if we can keep the team together, keep rowing in the same direction, look, everybody's got to give up on some of their preferences. None of us are going to get everything we want. I'll never ask any of my colleagues to compromise core principles because I share those principles with them, right? But Ronald Reagan used to teach us I'd rather get 80% of what I want than go over the cliff with a flag waving. I still believe in that idea, and I'm very optimistic. I am bullish on the future of America. I am bullish on our chances to change the way Washington works, Sean. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here. That's the vision I've cast to my colleagues. I believe it to my core. We're going to take this day by day, decision by decision, but keep everybody together and move the ball forward for the American people. I genuinely believe that we can get this done.
So a very optimistic, very bullish Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson from Louisiana, again, just 24 hours into the job and facing some pretty tall orders in terms of getting the government funded. But I liked a couple of things that he said. Again, regardless of political party, he said, look, I'd rather get 80% of what I want than go over the cliff with a flag waving. That doesn't take you anywhere. And so he is going to talk about how do you get to compromise? How do you get to negotiations? You don't have to give up on principles. You don't have to concede on principle. You don't have to let go of those fast-held, deeply believed principles. And you can negotiate. Those things are not mutually exclusive. That's part of, I think, been the problem in Washington, D.C. And so it's interesting to me that that Mike Johnson is now entering in his first 20 days at the job. He is going to face the very thing that forced his predecessor out of the job. The thing that those who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House said it was because of what he did with the Democrats to fund the government. And so Mike Johnson is going to face that very same challenge and issue. And the thing that we're going to be watching for, and the thing that you should be listening for and reading for, again, beyond headline stuff, and beyond the political attack stuff that's already going on, deeply disappointing on both sides. We'll talk about that coming up in hour number 2. But the fact that that Mike Johnson is going to take these slings and arrows from his side, from the other side, and how do we actually get through all of this in terms of funding the government? It has to be done. Something has to be done in terms of getting some sort of resolution, even if it is a short-term resolution, to allow them to finish the work. And let's not get lost in all of this, that the work that all of this fighting is about is one of the fundamental jobs, one of the few jobs that Congress actually has. And there are appropriations bills. There's 12 of them. They need to work through. They need to be passed. They need to go through both the House and the Senate and get to the president's desk. And so that has to happen. And it should have happened starting back in January and should have been done long before we got to September in a big crisis. And so I think the fact that Speaker Johnson is saying we're going to do that and we're going to do that work, even if we have to stay here around the clock to get it done. Now, really interesting, when Representative Johnson became the Speaker, when he was elected, immediately following that, they had just handed him the gavel. They had gone out onto the front steps of the Capitol building. Representative John Curtis jumped on the phone with us here on Inside Sources and talked to me for a moment about part of the reason why they had gone from being so divided as a party to having a unanimous vote for now Speaker Mike Johnson. Here's what he said.
Also, he put in writing his plan of how he was going to move through the next few weeks, how he was going to avoid a shutdown and yet not let the far-right people down.
And so the fact that he had gone from this idea of just grievance politics to governing principles and a plan, a written plan, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, I think that's a good thing. I think that's good for the left, the right, and for the country, to actually have people who are in office who are going to say, I'm going to lead, and because I'm going to lead, I'm going to develop a plan that's not just politics. I'm going to have a plan that I can execute, and then you can actually hold me accountable as to whether or not I deliver. That's pretty refreshing. And so we'll see how well Speaker Mike Johnson is able to carry that out and carry that through going into what will be very contentious votes and battles, a lot of messaging. It'll be far more messaging than it is substance and meaning. But will he be able to navigate through all of that to get to the principles and the policies to do the right thing, to do one of the few things that Congress is tasked to do, and that is fund the government? And the clock is winding down. 3 weeks were lost. Yes, Republicans are absolutely responsible for those 22 days. And everybody's responsible for the other 300 days when Congress did nothing and failed to do the job. So we will be equal opportunity offenders and equal opportunity commenders as we roll into a very interesting negotiating period beginning on Monday next week as they start to get serious about funding the government and avoiding a government shutdown. All right, we will step aside for some bottom of the hour news. When we come back, you don't want to go anywhere because it's our weekly look. Inside Sources takes an inside look at presidential politics. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. ESPN College Game Day has come back to Salt Lake City ahead of Utah's huge football game with Oregon this weekend. KSL News Radio's Adam Small was at the U this morning for the opening of the Pat McAfee Show.
At the start of the show, Pat and another host said they couldn't believe how many people had come out so early in the morning. Diehard fans like JoJo Kim were loving every minute of the national spotlight.
It's awesome. We came here the first about 7 or 8 years ago when it was here. But yeah, this is amazing.
The College Game Day program begins at 7 tomorrow before the Utes face one of their greatest tests of the season in Heisman candidate Bo Nix and the 8th-ranked Oregon Ducks.
You can catch all the festivities and the game on ESPN tomorrow. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Appalled, disgusted, sickened are just some of the adjectives describing what protesters were saying outside a courthouse in Long Island as their congressman, George Santos, pleaded not guilty to more charges. ABC's Dave Packer reports.
The new charges include Santos allegedly charging tens of thousands of dollars of personal expenses to donors' credit cards. While he's being arraigned, these constituents protesting outside the courthouse.
We knew he was a liar. We knew he was a criminal, but we didn't really think he was that stupid. He's looking at over 20 years in prison.
Enough is enough, says this New York voter.
We demand accountability from the courts, the media, and our political leaders against corrupt, fraudulent grifters. Woo!
Santos' trial set for September of next year. Dave Packer, ABC News, New York.
Some other members of Congress from New York are sponsoring a resolution now to expel Santos from the House. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average having a down day, 389 points in the red right now. The NASDAQ, on the other hand, is up, but just by about 39 points. And our KSL weather, going to be chilly for tomorrow's football game. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by two guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
The Management Minute is a service of the MBA program in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. I'm Professor Scott Hammond. What keeps people in a company when they could make more money elsewhere? What keeps athletes on a team when high-profile opportunities tempt? What brings volunteers into a fire department, emergency room, search and rescue team to give their time and work without pay? It's the social bond we create when we work with others. The caring work families that we sometimes not always create. They are worth more than money, more than promotions, more than individual recognition. If you have a work environment where people genuinely care about you, where you are emotionally healthy, don't sell it for more stress and sometimes more money. Hold on to it for as long as you can. Learn more about creating a positive work environment with an MBA from Utah State University. Go to utahstatemba.com. That's utahstatemba.com. I'm Scott Hammond. Hope to see you in one of our classes.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
That stalled tractor trailer has been cleared from Riverdale Road at the I-84 junction. It was on the overpass. All lanes of travel and the ramp are now open. We do have a crash northbound State Street, about 2700 south. It's been affecting right lanes of travel. Transform your outdated kitchen with half-priced granite for $2,500. Granite, quartz, cabinets, and flooring. Visit halfpricedgranite.com. Affordable luxury. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, chilly with the north breeze coming in for the weekend. Today's high 54, tomorrow 46. Lows dip into the 20s on Sunday and Monday. And right now we're sunny and 50 degrees. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources, an inside look at 2024 presidential politics.
Well, it must be Friday, because every Friday here on Inside Sources, we take an inside look at presidential politics. Obviously, all of that leading up to the very big presidential election coming up for 2024. And as we go into the week, this is another one of those weeks where there are always fascinating things going on, things happening inside of campaigns that are really interesting beyond the headlines that we can take note of. And there is, as there always is, the head-scratching and the unexplainable that take place in every presidential election season. And as we always say on this show, trying to understand the behavior of someone running for president is like trying to smell the color 7. And so we will start smelling the color 7 with a very interesting smelling of the color 7 by Minnesota Representative Dean Phillips, who yesterday hinted of what he was going to do and actually dropping his hat in the ring to run against the incumbent Joe Biden. And so on an interview yesterday with CBS, Dean Phillips was asked why he would do this. Here's the exchange.
Are you running for president?
I am. I have to. I think President Biden has done a spectacular job for our country, but it's not about the past. This is an election about the future. I will not sit still. I will not be quiet in the face of numbers that are so clearly saying that we're going to be facing an emergency next November.
So again, that's Minnesota Democratic Representative Dean Phillips. He formally made that announcement today, by the way, in a pretty lackluster and under-the-radar announcement, as only a member of the House of Representatives could do, saying they're going to run for president. But I do think it was interesting. He did say the quiet part out loud that a lot of Democrats have been frustrated with. He acknowledged the president. He praised President Biden for the things that he thought the president had done well. And then he made what I thought was the most important point. And to me, this is the most important part of any election. It's not about what was. It's not about what is. It's about what's next. And so Representative Dean Phillips is saying President Biden is not what's next. And he said there's going to be a lot of crises. There's going to be a lot of challenges. And President Biden neither has the support amongst the Democrats or Americans more broadly to lead into that what's next kind of moment. So very interesting. Again, he doesn't have a lot of money. He has zero name ID. And so this is clearly one of those candidacies to say to his Democratic colleagues and counterparts that we should be thinking beyond just President Joe Biden. And so always interesting to see how that plays out. And this happens on both sides of the aisle. It happens with Republican incumbents as well as it does with Democrats. So this is an interesting one, particularly because the president is struggling in national polling. His favorabilities continue to be at really low points. And the president, by the way, is really busy right now doing some pretty important stuff as it relates to international affairs, as well as stuff right here at home. The president did make some noise this week. He made his announcements about investment in America's tech industry.
A tech hub is we're going to invest in critical technologies like biotechnology, critical materials, quantum computing, advanced manufacturing. So the U.S. will lead the world again in innovation across the board.
So it's President Biden announcing his plans to invest in America's tech industries, tech hubs. So we broke that down on this show a little earlier this week. talking about the good, bad, and the ugly when it comes to those kinds of investments. This is not a new plan. This is not a new idea. It is one that has not proved to be very effective, other than it does tend to channel money towards certain companies. And it's something that a lot of states get caught up in, and in the end, doesn't always produce the promised results. So it's an interesting idea. I think the message is right in terms of what the president is saying. I don't think the application or the execution is going to quite match what the rhetoric is putting out there. Now, really interesting yesterday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis went on CNN with Caitlin Collins for an interview, wide-ranging discussion. This is a campaign that has been struggling and flailing just a bit. One of the big topics, of course, was the shooting in Maine. Caitlin Collins asked Governor DeSantis about specific policy stances to eliminate mass shootings. Here's the exchange between them, starting with red flag laws.
So it's safe to say President DeSantis would not sign any kind of national red flag law?
No, I don't think that'd be appropriate at all.
So what is, if you're president tonight and you're the one lowering those flags to have staff at the White House, what's your solution
we're going to do,
fix what happened?
well, two things. I think the mental health issue in our country, part of it is we do need more institutionalization. There are some people who are dangerous to society. A lot of them get put back on the streets. That will require more resources, but I think that that's appropriate. A lot of the people that end up in the justice system have mental problems, and so we've not done a good job with that. Now, on the other side, on the crime, we're going to hold people accountable. If you commit a gun crime, you're going to go away for a long time.
So it was Ron DeSantis, again, talking about issues of the day, and those are things that you have to do as president. There's always the agenda you want to pursue, and then there's the reality that you are dealt on a daily basis when you sit in the Oval Office, and rarely do you get to lead your day with the things that you want to drive for the day. So you have to be able to respond and react to changing circumstances while still having an agenda to move things forward. But often you are reacting to events that are going on around the country or half a world away. Also interesting yesterday, a rising candidate amongst the Republicans, Nikki Haley, appeared for an interview and gave her thoughts on anti-Semitism in the country and what should be done about it.
We do think Israel has the right to exist. We do need to make sure we fight hate in every place we see it. We do need to make sure on these college campuses that we hold these universities accountable. They get the right to freedom of speech. We want that for our students, but that doesn't mean they get the right to freedom of hate. And what we're seeing on college campuses is they are not being held accountable. And if they're going to do this, if they're not going to acknowledge the hate that's on their campuses, I think their tax-exempt status needs to be revoked.
So a very interesting conversation around what's happening on many college campuses, and always having that right to free speech. That's a crucial thing to maintain no matter what. And that there also has to be some of those consequences in terms of the way things are done, how things actually get executed out there. So I think all of that is real crucial and actually matters in that process. And so as you look at the presidential campaign, as it continues to rock along, this is one of those weeks in a campaign where there's a lot that's going on underneath the radar that you can't really capture in a headline or in a soundbite. But might be really indicative of where things actually are. One of those things that is clearly off the radar that didn't get any attention was a real shift in strategy by Senator Tim Scott. He has directed almost the entire focus and almost the entirety of the resources of his campaign to Iowa. He really feels, and clearly his campaign team have decided, that his best path forward goes squarely through Iowa. So you won't see him spending nearly as much time up in New Hampshire. He's from South Carolina, so he has a little bit of a competitive space there, he and Nikki Haley both being from that state. But he's not going to be out in Nevada. He's not going to be in a lot of other places because he's convinced that his best path is to work one-on-one. It's hand-to-hand stuff there in Iowa with those Iowa caucus goers who will go out on a very cold January night and stay around for 4 or 5 hours to work through that process in the Iowa caucuses. And so that's something under the radar you're not hearing about in presidentials, but very indicative of where the Tim Scott campaign is. This might be their real last chance to create a focus and to move it forward. We know we've got another big debate coming up in Miami coming up here in about 2 weeks. We'll cover that as we roll into the week next week as well. All right, well, that wraps up our weekly Inside Sources Inside look at presidential politics. We're going to step aside for a quick break, but stay right where you are, because when we come back, we're going to talk about the soul of civility and how we actually might need to make people a little uncomfortable to be a little more civil. We'll talk about that coming up next. Stick around.
It's football season, NBA basketball season, and a season of important and sensitive stories. Elections at home, war abroad. So depend on Tim and Amanda for the latest breaking news from 5 to 9. Get analysis and discussion with David Dujanovic and Boyd Matheson. And updated news and traffic as you drive home with Jeff Kaplan. In this season, rely on KSL for certainty. We have you covered at KSL News Radio.
Kids are back in the classroom, and at Central Bank, they understand the importance of forming good financial habits at an early age and encouraging kids to succeed in the classroom. Central Bank's Youth Smart Savings Account rewards students for great grades. Central Bank will reward your child grades 6 through 12 for every A or A- earned on each report card, up to $32 per school year. They'll also match your child's opening deposit up to $20. And if earning a higher interest rate than a regular savings account isn't enough, they'll also let your youngsters choose from their treasure chest with each in-person savings deposit. Open a Youth Smart Savings Account for your child, teen, or grandchild and teach them to save early. Central Bank's Youth Smart Savings Account is the smartest, hardworking children's savings account around. Visit them online at cbutah.com or in person at one of their 12 Utah County locations. Additional terms and conditions may apply. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
If your child has a common orthopedic condition, that doesn't mean you can only get common treatments. You can choose Shriners Children's. Our world-class care is not limited to insurance networks or to what's been done before. The same doctors who innovate treatments for the most complicated orthopedic issues will help your child grow and develop properly. See what we do at shrinerschildrens.org. Shriners Children's, the most amazing care anywhere.
Some days I cover up because of my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now I'm hitting the road with clearer skin thanks to Skyrizi, Risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection for adults who are candidates for systemic or phototherapy. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieved 90% clearer skin at 4 months. And Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
Thanks to Skyrizi, there's nothing on my skin, and that means everything. Ask your doctor today about Skyrizi, the #1 dermatologist prescribed biologic in psoriasis, and visit skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKY-RIZZI to learn more.
Visit the contest page on KSLNewsRadio.com. This week, enter to win tickets to the Piano Guys, 3 nights next September at the Sandy Amphitheater. Tickets are on sale now. Or see how you can win Lower Bowl Utah Jazz tickets. Catch the Jazz in action this season with select games airing on KSL News Radio. Plus, win tickets to Straight No Chaser, November 2nd at the Eccles Theater. Get started now. Text the word contest to 57500 or visit KSLNewsRadio.com/contests.
A stranger with a gun came upon 2 teens taking pictures under a rising full moon. But violence is only the beginning of this story.
Sometimes I thought, there are no miracles. Yeah, there are, and this is a big one.
I'm Amy Donaldson, and I've spent my career talking about how lives are undone by violence. The Letter is a podcast about how lives are remade. Follow The Letter at theletterpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Dave and Dujanovic.
I hope our listeners take away lots of information, but also a new way of looking at a topic.
Ideas, their thoughts, the things they thought they knew. I hope that gets challenged when they listen to us.
I've had listeners stop me at the grocery store and ask me, what is your show about? And I'll tell them our show is anything from politics to your pocketbook.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, an enthusiastic crowd gathered this morning at the ESPN Game Day stage on the U of U campus, getting ready for tomorrow's big game with Oregon. Second, demonstrators gathered outside a courthouse in New York today, demanding Congressman George Santos' conviction on fraud charges. And third, a Democratic member of Congress is beginning a presidential campaign challenging Joe Biden in his own party. Right now, sunny and 50 degrees in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
As we often talk about, people on the left, people on the right, people on the middle can disagree on a host of issues, but we should be able to talk about all the issues. We don't have to agree on them, but we should be able to talk about all of them. Not in a superficial and fluffy kind of way, not in a is the glass half full, half empty, or rose-colored kind of way, not in a kumbaya kind of way, or a group hug will fix it all kind of way. There's a better way, and the real key to that is civility. But often we even misunderstand civility. It gets lost in the headlines as well. And we're really pleased to have joining us on the program for the first time Alexandra Hudson, writer, speaker, founder, and curator of Civic Renaissance, which I love that just in and of itself. Lexi, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Your book, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves, I think has an amazing backstory. You have a little bit of history in the manners business. Tell us about that.
I do. My mother, she's called Judy the Manners Lady, and I was raised in this home that was incredibly attentive to social norms and expectations, but I am constitutionally allergic to authority. I hate being told what to do. I hate rules. So I always question these rules of propriety I was expected to follow, but my mother promised that they would lead to success in work, school, and life if I followed them, so I did, and she was right. Until I got to to federal government. I was there during a very divided moment in 2018. And when I got there, all of a sudden, everything I thought to be true, I knew to be true about the world was questioned. And I saw these two extremes. On one hand, I saw people with sharp elbows who were willing to step on anyone to get ahead. And on the other hand, I saw people who were polished and polite and suave. And I was like, oh, these are my people. Until I realized they would smile and flatter at me one moment and then stab me in the back the next. And so I realized that politeness was not all it was cracked up to be. My mother had said growing up that manners were an outward extension of our inward character. And yet here I was surrounded by people who were well-mannered enough, but ruthless and cruel. So that experience clarified for me the essential distinction between civility and politeness.
Yeah, so let's unpack that, because I think that's the key to all of this, and to be able to have conversations across our differences to make sure we maintain that dignity and even the divinity of another person's humanity. Dig us into that in terms of, first, the difference between just those polite outward things and true civility.
That's right. So when I left government, I was so frustrated and disillusioned and in despair. And I zoomed out and started asking big questions again, like, what is personhood? What does it mean to be a human being? What is imago Dei? And what is the bare minimum of respect that we are owed and owe to others by virtue of our shared humanity and common dignity as human beings? And what does that look like in practice? And what my experience in government made me realize was that, politeness alone was not enough. And that politeness is mere, it's technique, it's behavior, it's external, it's etiquette and manners and mores, whereas civility is something deeper and richer. It is internal. It's a disposition. It's a way of seeing others as our moral equals who are worthy of respect just by virtue of our shared moral status as members of the human community. And crucially, sometimes actually respecting someone requires being impolite. It requires telling hard truths, engaging in robust debate, breaking the rules of politeness and politesse for the sake of actually loving and respecting someone. And so, as I argue in my book, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves, while politeness at its best can perfect the inner disposition of civility, it can be, it can serve it, but at its worst, it can be a tool to manipulate others and deceive them.
Yeah.
And this is what I learned with those two extremes in government, that, at first I thought that they were polar opposites, that extreme hostility and the extreme politeness. But I realized that they're actually both very similar. They're two sides of the same coin, because both extreme hostility and extreme politeness see other people as means to their selfish ends. The hostility sees them as pawns to be destroyed on the way to achieving one's ends, and politeness sees others as pawns to be manipulated. But so only civility sees others as beings worthy of respect in and of themselves, just because we're people.
Yeah, that going beyond that transactional nature to relationships is such a big part of getting to civility. If everything's a transaction, whether it's we got to annihilate them and put that opposition out of the water, or we need to manipulate these people so I can get to the ends that I think are good for me. All of that, those are just transactions. That's the outward behavior as opposed to the inward principle. And again, that true civility. So talk about how we actually do that. Because you talked about that word of respect. And I actually think the proper way to show respect to a dictator is to make them very uncomfortable, which is what you actually allude to.
That's exactly right. So I reclaim the whole tradition of civil disobedience in my conception of civility, my definition. And I love etymology. Etymology is throughout my book. It's kind of like they're fun little stories to help us remember and illuminate our language. So the etymology of civility and politeness supports this distinction I make. So the etymology of politeness is poliere, which means to smooth or to polish. And that is what politeness does. It papers over, it polishes over difference, as opposed to giving us the tools to grapple with difference head on. The Latin of civility is civis, all things related to the city, citizenship, and the citizen. And that is what civility is and does. It's the habits, the tools, the mores, the disposition of citizenship in the city, and that includes the tradition of civil disobedience, which is the duty of the citizen to speak truth to power, to stand up to injustice when a regime is being unjust. And I love Dr. King here. He was very instructive to me. His letter from a Birmingham jail. He says, how do we tell between a just and unjust law? A just law is squared with the moral law, with natural law. How do we know a just or unjust social norm? A just social norm is one that is squared with the moral natural law of the universe. It uplifts human personality and affirms human dignity, as Dr. King said. And that is exactly how we should tell the difference between a just and unjust social norm. And when it is our duty as citizens to stand up against injustice in our society.
Oh, that's so important. And I love this whole connection between smooth and polite. We actually had two very early civil rights leaders who just put out an extraordinary book, ironically called Climbing the Rough Side of the Mountain. And it's the only way you can actually get to the top. The smoothness, you can't get to the top, but they use that very thing in terms of that duty of citizens, that civility. You have to climb the rough side of the mountain. This is a fascinating book. This is a great read. You should all check this one out. And we really appreciate you joining us on the program today. Lexi Hudson, author of The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves. And Lexi, thanks again for joining us. We look forward to having you back and continuing the conversation.
Such a pleasure. Would love to be back. Thank you for having me.
All right. Again, that's Lexi Hudson. She's the author of The Soul of Civility, and I love the fact that she's looking at this in a very different way. This is not about being polite. This is not just niceties. It's much deeper than that. It's much more important than that. And it's not just smoothing things over. That's where politeness comes from. It's climbing the rough side of the mountain, as we learned earlier this week of those great champions of civil rights. There's a way to do that and do it with great dignity for everyone. That wraps up hour number 1 of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back. Hour number 2's up next. Stick around on KSL News Radio.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
Listen at home on any smart speaker.
And in your car at 102.7 FM.
This is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour is developing news from the auto pedestrian accident that left one man dead in Provo this morning. Police have located the vehicle that they believe hit the man in the intersection of 500 West and Center Street, and they've booked a suspect into jail, a man named Jose Sandoval. The victim has also now been identified as Brian Keith Coltharp. He was 43. Salt Lake City police have identified the person killed in a fatal shooting in Sugar House early yesterday. They say 34-year-old Taven Troy Brandon was taken to the hospital in critical condition and died later at the hospital. You need to plan ahead for delays starting this weekend if you have to get to the Salt Lake City International Airport. As KSL News Radio's Heather Kelly reports, the delays have nothing to do with your flights.
UDOT will restrict the ramp from northbound I-215 on the west side to I-80 to just one lane starting tonight through early Monday morning. Then the ramp will close completely until late Wednesday night. The closure also affects access to Redwood Road from the West Side Belt in that area.
The UDOT recommends an alternate route to get to the airport, such as Bangor or Interstate 80. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Israeli officials announced this afternoon that the IDF will begin expanding ground activity in Gaza later tonight. ABC's Ines de la Cotara has the latest on what officials have suggested those expanded activities could include.
This does appear to be Israel laying the groundwork here for this big ground operation, but this is, at the moment, it does appear to be still limited ground incursion. This comes as they're also saying that they're going to be very significantly escalating their airstrikes on Gaza, this latest wave, possibly the heaviest wave of airstrikes we've seen since this all began.
An apartment building in Tel Aviv was hit earlier today by rockets fired from Gaza. 3 injuries reported there. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average having a down day. Once again, 366 points in the red. The NASDAQ up 47 points as we approach the close of trading. And our KSL weather, going to be a chilly football game tomorrow. That's next. KSL News Time 2:02.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
If you've been thinking about losing weight, but you think, oh man, the holidays are coming up, I can't do this over the holidays, it's going to take forever, let me just stop you right there. Because I lost 34 pounds in less than 3 months. Which, yeah, the tail end of it might be over the holidays, but you'll be shocked at how fast the weight comes off you. If you're a woman, it's about 2 to 3 pounds on average a week. A man is more, 3 to 5 pounds a week. And I was just average 2 to 3 pounds a week, 34 pounds in less than 3 months. And you know what? That 3 months is going to go by like that, whether you start now or not. So you might as well start now.
And if you only want to lose 20 pounds, which they tell us is average for most of the people that come to Soda Weight Loss, you can have that done before Christmas. It goes that quickly. My daughter lost 42 pounds, and she started about the same time you did, Amanda, going into the holidays, but she was determined that this was going to be the last time she had to go through this process. And they're determined to help you do that at Soda Weight Loss, too. Go to sodaweightloss.com, spelled S-O-T-A. Think Tim and Amanda. It is state-of-the-art.
Utah's business landscape is evolving, and the key to success is staying ahead of the curve. Get ready for an extraordinary event that promises to take your business to new heights. Join everyone at Utah Business Forward, November 16th, for the premier conference exclusively designed for executives hungry for practical insights and actionable strategies to propel their business forward. Featuring more than 30 of Utah's foremost business influencers, this event covers a diverse range of topics. Notable guest speakers include Gail Miller and Brandon Fugel. Attendees can expect to gain a wealth of valuable insights and knowledge. The conference is designed with you in mind, addressing the very challenges that executives like you face daily. With 5 distinct tracks covering entrepreneurship, international business, marketing, people and culture, and strategy. You'll gain invaluable knowledge across a range of crucial areas. Reserve your seat today at forward.utahbusiness.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Right now, we are seeing heavy delays both north and southbound on Legacy Parkway, likely due to the road work. On the southbound side, it's as you're coming from Farmington, and the northbound side, it's going through Centerville. Join the Utah Symphony for the greatest classical hits from the 1700s to today. Tickets start at just $21. Get yours today at utahsymphony.org. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, chilly with a north breeze coming in for the weekend. Today's high 54, tomorrow 46, then lows dip into the 20s for Sunday and Monday. Right now, we're at 52 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
With everything happening here at home and in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine against Russian aggression enters its second winter. And as we begin that second winter of the war, we want to make sure we take a step back and think again about what got us here, what led Russia here, and how did Vladimir Putin's presidency lead to this war? Is there an exit ramp? And what will Russia look like when the war is over? Beyond the headlines, let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
We are very thrilled to have joining us on the program today Leon Aron, and he is the author of Riding the Tiger, Vladimir Putin's Russia and the Uses of War. Leon's an acclaimed Russian studies scholar, American Enterprise Institute senior fellow, a Moscow native, who I would note was sanctioned by President Vladimir Putin's regime and has just taken an extraordinary look into an area of the world that I think a lot of people think they understand, but there's a whole lot underneath the headlines there that we tend to be missing. And Leon, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here, Boyd.
So give us some perspective and kind of the overarching theme of the book that kind of helps us get beyond those high-level perceptions that most people have of Vladimir Putin, but maybe miss some of the deeper things that are really driving what's going on inside of Russia.
Boyd, this is a kind of a guided tour over the house that Putin built. The book has 5 chapters, and each chapter could have been another book. I have behind me, you can't see, but I have behind me about 7 huge boxes of materials I've gone through. But my sense was to produce something that's relatively short, but gives a reader an idea of how Russia and Putin arrived to where they are today. It's kind of taking mosaic tiles and creating a portrait that I think cohere. And I started this book in 2019, and at that time it was called A Small Victorious War. The war did happen, and I think the book is still relevant, of course, for 2 reasons. First, as I said, because it showed us how Russia arrived to this war. But most importantly, because sooner or later the war will be over, but the Russia that Putin created will stay with us.
And I think that's an important thing. So let's start at the beginning there, and let's get into some of the elements that we often don't think about in terms of how did we get here? What was it that Vladimir Putin deployed in terms of propaganda, in kind of this nationalist focus? How did he get to where we are today?
Well, it's interesting because for the first two terms, 2000 to 2008, Putin's popularity, which is the same as his regime's legitimacy, I mean, they're one and the same, was based on a phenomenal economic growth. 10% a year, real terms, GDP, people's incomes, largely helped by the skyrocketing price of oil, but also because all the hard work was done by Boris Yeltsin before him, and he just handed a transformed economy, privatized economy, modern economy to Putin on a silver platter in 2000. And then Putin goes to his third presidency in 2012, and something is beginning to happen. The economy is stalling. The economy is slowing down. And there were many reasons for that, including corruption, including incompetence, including the fact that the state started taking over private enterprises, all sorts of reasons. And of course, the oil began to wobble. But at that time, Putin had a choice how to preserve his popularity. He was advised by some people next to him to start liberalizing, both in terms of economy and in terms of politics. Otherwise, they said, we will just be creeping along as far as the economy is concerned. Well, Putin could not do it. He would not do it. It was against his ideology. Plus, he remembers Mikhail Gorbachev's example, and he didn't want to lose his power. So what he did instead is he started switching the basis of his regime's legitimacy from the growth of incomes and progress of economy to what I call militarized patriotism, which is to instill the Russians with the sense that they're surrounded by enemies, that they're a besieged fortress, but that he would defend them. And it worked. We have public opinion polls that showed that people believed that was the case.
Wow. And so that leads, of course, right into Ukraine. And as you rightly had pointed out before it all began to evolve, now we're in the midst of that. And Vladimir Putin seems to be stuck in this spot now where victory seems really hard. To retreat seems almost impossible for him. Is there an off-ramp? And as you pointed out, the war will end at some point and what he's left behind will remain. So what does that look like?
In Ukraine, Boyd, Putin, I think, hopes for three things. He hopes that the Russian economy and society, which are getting really slowly but surely hit by sanctions, would sustain the effort for maybe 1 or 2 more years. In the meantime, he hopes that Ukraine gets ground down, literally, and demoralized. And most of all, he hopes that the West will get tired of Ukraine. The so-called Ukraine fatigue, that they'll start pushing Ukraine towards settling for all sorts of reasons. And he may be right. He may be right with all three of them, or at least a couple out of the three. What bothers me, and that's what the last chapter of the book is about, is that two can play a waiting game. And what if none of that happens? None of what he hopes for comes to pass. Well, as you pointed out, how do you end the war you cannot win and cannot walk away from? And so here I am a bit worried, well, more than a bit, because I think he could escalate and he could bring what I describe as his nuclear blackmail. And we've seen it, by the way. He just exited from the test ban treaty. And he exited early this year from the New START treaty, Strategic Arms Treaty. He continues to blackmail the West, and he, I think, will escalate that. He may bring us to the verge of a nuclear war, but then I think he would pull back and say, okay, all right, that's too much. Let's have a universal settlement. What that means, of course, is getting a kind of truce or a ceasefire in Ukraine on his terms.
That is such a fascinating thing to keep our eye on as that all moves forward. Give us one last thing just in our last minute here. Something else that you're watching now with your unique perspective and history there. What's something else that we should be keeping our eye on as it relates to Vladimir Putin, not just in what's happening in Ukraine, but really with other allies and enemies around the world?
Well, I mean, something happened to the Russian diplomacy. You see it in absolutely uncharacteristic response to Hamas's horrific attack on Israel. Before, first 23 years of Putin's rule, there would have been total solidarity with Israel. He would have expressed condolences. He would have been among the first to call the Israeli prime minister. It did not happen. And it did not happen because Putin is now fighting the US, and the friend of my enemy is my enemy. And probably just as important, he depends on Iran for a key tool in his war in Ukraine, which is the drones. For better or worse, I don't know where his heart is, although he's personally been rather friendly towards Israel and Russian Jews. I think you do what you have to do for your policy. And he's now hewing close to Iran's official response.
Wow. That is fascinating, and we'll continue to follow all of that. This is a deep dive, great read, Riding the Tiger, Vladimir Putin's Russia and the Uses of War. Leon Aron, of course, part of our friends over at AEI, and someone who just understands this from such a unique perspective as a Russian studies scholar, as someone who's a native of Moscow and who understands through real-life conversations and interactions and interviews, what this really looks like and what this really means. Leon, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to having you back.
Thanks very much, Boyd.
Not very often you get to actually talk with someone who has been sanctioned by Vladimir Putin. Clearly, Leon is a threat to Vladimir Putin and his propaganda machine in terms of telling the tale of what is actually going on inside of Russia. And what Vladimir Putin is doing and using to maintain power. And that is the deal. When you're that kind of dictator, it's all about remaining in power until your time here on this planet is done. And so interesting that you see Russia literally following Iranian diplomacy and policy rather than staking out their own. It tells you how critical Iran is to Russia's war effort as they continue their invasion of Ukraine. And as we head into the winter, it is going to be very tough slog and tough sledding, but it will be interesting to see what can be done and if the U.S. will step in and step up in terms of providing Ukraine not just what they need to sustain it, but to actually win the battle.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Colder weather is on the way.
Get those sweaters and jackets ready. Get the sprinklers winterized.
And storms, too.
We've got a chance for another storm to bring in a little bit more rain.
We have you covered as the seasons change. Stay updated with traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the 9s. Mornings and afternoons on KSL News Radio.
Hey, this is Hans Olsen. There's a reason that more Utahns, including myself, are members of America First Credit Union. It's because we love being a part of a winning team. I opened my first business account with America First Credit Union going back 13 years ago. I've opened 4 accounts for each one of my children. I opened up my last business account with America First Credit Union because I know they're going to treat me and my family fairly. It's no wonder that Forbes magazine named America First to their 2023 Utah Best in State Credit Unions and their 2023 Utah Best in State Employers list. The only credit union in Utah to receive both awards. If you've got financial questions and needs, America First Credit Union has the answers. So come join me and thousands of others at Forbes magazine's 2023 Utah Best in State Credit Union and Employer. Visit AmericaFirst.com or stop by your local branch. It's great to be on the winning team. Federally insured by NCUA.
They are Intermountain Battery, Utah's premier battery dealer, and they've been building their reputation since 1971 on the principles of prompt service, high-quality products, and unbeatable prices. They believe in empowering customers with the knowledge needed to make the best choices for their battery needs. They place a high value on your experience with them because every customer is part of their family. Call them at 801-266-7465 for all of your auto, RV, and ATV battery needs. 801-266-7465.
Did you know gas goes bad in as little as 30 days? Bad gas can cause rough starts, poor performance, or no starts at all. Stable, America's #1 fuel stabilizer, ensures quick and easy starts after storage. Stable's proprietary formula keeps fuel fresh for 2 years, outperforming competitors. Whether it's your car, truck, boat, lawnmower, leaf blower, weed trimmer, ATV, motorcycle, or anything else with an engine, when you store, start with Stable.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing. Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit. And make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Save $2,500 on a new furnace and air conditioner from Any Hour Services. For more information, call Any Hour Services or schedule a free estimate online at anyhourservices.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Salt Lake City police have identified the man killed in a shooting in Sugar House early yesterday. Taven Troy Brandon was 34. Second, getting to the Salt Lake City airport will be more complicated starting this weekend due to road construction. And third, more ground operations expected soon from Israeli forces surrounding Gaza. Right now, 52 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. As we round out the week, there was so much going on this week that we wanted to make sure you didn't miss a few things that may have fallen beyond the horizon of some of the big events and the big happenings. And so it's always good on a Friday to just zoom out just a little bit, make sure we're catching all the little nuances and things that took place that could have a big impact. Right here at home, across the country, and around the world. And so we're going to go through a few of those news items that may have been just under your horizon. One that I am sure none of you were thinking about today. It was something that happened in the United States Senate yesterday. And that was that the Senate voted down a bill that was about making sure that there would not be a government shutdown, creating a permanent stopgap. Now, this was a Republican-led initiative with Democratic support, but on Wednesday, they voted down this amendment. It came from James Langford, a Republican from Oklahoma, and one of the good people in our nation's capital, regardless of political persuasion. So the vote on this particular amendment was 56-42. Now, of course, in the Senate, you have to get to 60 votes in order for that to actually move through and go on to the next step. But it was voted down. But as I said, there were some Republicans who voted against it. Rand Paul voted against it. But you also had a host of Democrats who were on board. Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, Tim Kaine from Virginia, Mark Kelly from Arizona, Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Bob Menendez from New Jersey, Jackie Rosen from Nevada, Kyrsten Sinema, who's, of course, independent from Arizona, Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia. So as you look at this, you think, now, what was this about, and why are you telling me about this? The amendment would have required lawmakers to make sure that any future government funding agreements would be done without the threat of a shutdown. And what the bill would basically have done, it would have forced the Senate to work on nothing else but funding the government until it's done. Now, you may think that sounds like common sense. I think it is, actually. So the government will continue to run. In the midst of the negotiations, you could have all the debates. You could have all the amendments about what you do and don't want to fund in government. And things would just keep rolling, but the Senate and the House would be unable to do anything else, which would force lawmakers to stay in Washington, D.C., to stay on the appropriations process and getting the government properly funded. Now, some squawked and said, no, that's unrealistic. You know, how can they possibly work on that 7 days a week until it gets done? Well, the American people do that all the time. You have a big project at work, you just work on it until it's done. You have a crisis in your neighborhood or in your house, you just work on it until it's done. That's what you do. And so it's a little disheartening that you couldn't get the rest of the Democrats on board to say, you know what, this would be a good thing. It would prevent any threat from a government shutdown. But there were those who said, no, we can't do that. It would just make it too hard because we couldn't do anything else. And what if we had to do something else? Well, the idea would be you'd get the appropriations done and then move on to whatever else needed to be done. It's not radical. It's actually pretty straightforward and pretty logical. And so to me, it was a sad moment that I think we missed. But I do have another solution that doesn't require any vote from anyone, and that is for Congress to just do their job. There should never, ever, 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 ever be a threat of a government shutdown. There never should. There never should. And the way you never have that is for Congress to do the job. As outlined in the Constitution, it's super simple. So you may have missed that this week. I thought it was a pretty unique and a pretty inspired proposal from Senator Langford from Oklahoma. Worth thinking about, definitely worth talking about for sure. Now, some other things that may have fallen off the horizon that you may have missed. California Governor Gavin Newsom spoke during a conference in China on his view of China and America and the economic relationship between the two.
The more successful China is, the more successful we all will be. And I think that's incredibly important. There's a lot of discussion in this country, and there was a lot of discussion today and yesterday, and there'll be a lot more in the next few days around de-risking the nomenclature of the moment versus decoupling. For me, I'm a little more simple. It's about diversification. And I think that's a healthy thing for every country. But again, it's just about competition, raises everyone's game. But zero sum, I completely reject that framework.
So again, I actually like that message from Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. They're in China saying, look, when we play a zero-sum game, everybody loses in the end. And so there are ways to get around our diplomatic differences, and that's okay. Also, just really important that we haven't spent a lot of time on, and that is that the Chinese foreign minister visited the White House, and all of this was part of diplomatic steps. There were meetings with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, all of that teeing up and paving the way for a visit in November between President Xi and President Joe Biden, which I understand will be taking place in California, I believe, in San Francisco. So all of that work being done this week, again, kind of beyond a lot of the headlines as we've been consumed with things happening in the Middle East, the tragedy of the shooting in Maine, amongst a host of other things going on in our nation's capital. And then finally, just as we round out this segment in terms of some of the news you might have missed, I do want to go back to the shooting in Maine and how we start to have a different kind of conversation as it relates to that. New Speaker of the House Mike Johnson from Louisiana shared on Fox News just yesterday some thoughts around the shooting and some of the policy that might follow.
At the end of the day, the problem is the human heart. It's not guns, it's not the weapons. At the end of the day, we have to protect the right of the citizens to protect themselves, and that's the Second Amendment.
Is there any specific gun law that you would look at or any new legislation you would look at?
Well, been on the job for 48 hours. We'll see. I mean, there'll be lots of discussion, as there are after these heartbreaking tragedies. It's not the weapon, it's the underlying problem. I believe we have to address the root problems of these things, and mental health, obviously, as in this case, is a big issue, and we've got to seriously address that as a society and as a government, and there's lots of measures pending on that as well.
So again, that's the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. And I think it's interesting. The White House immediately responded to a portion of Speaker Johnson's statement about it being from the heart, not just a gun issue. And this is where I think we have to be careful, regardless of where you fall on the gun issue itself, is we cannot make this one more polar thing where it's either or. To me, it's an all of the above. Can we talk about some of these particular weapons? Absolutely. Can we talk about background checks? Absolutely. Can we talk about red flag laws? Absolutely. Can we talk about mental health issues? Absolutely. Can we talk about upstream issues in terms of the state of the family and violence in video games and all of those other things? Yes, 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 yes. All of the above. And let's talk about all of it. And let's not make it a fake fight and a false choice like we do to so many other issues when we face a big problem in this country. Because the answer is rarely found in an extreme of one point of view or another. It's starting from a position, and then we talk about the principles, and then we can figure out what the policy needs to be. And we can get there, but we cannot get there if whenever we have a big issue, whether it's a horrific shooting like we've seen in Maine this week, whether it's something at the southern border, whether it's dealing with the fentanyl crisis, whether it's the crisis in the Middle East or Ukraine or anything else, we have to quit going to the polar extremes because you can't get there. You can't get to a good place from there. You can't build a bridge from the polar extremes. You start by talking about the principles, and then you can actually move the conversation forward. So those are just a few of the things that have all been in, on, and around the news this week, some things that you may have missed in the race and chase of what's been going on. We're going to go ahead and step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. When we come back, we're going to stay with the theme of what you might have missed this week. We had some extraordinary people on this program this week, and we're going to go back to a couple that you might have missed with some insight about Qatar's role in hostages. We're going to talk about Representative Curtis, what's going on behind the scenes in the room where it happens, and a host of other things that you just might have missed. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Provo police have released the name of the man killed in a hit-and-run accident early this morning. He was 43-year-old Brian Keith Coltharp. Officers say he was lying in the street when he was hit by a van that then left the scene. Later in the morning, officers located the van and arrested Jose Sandoval, and he was booked into jail on a charge of failure to remain at the scene of a fatal accident. Utah Highway Patrol troopers discovered 24,000 pills laced with fentanyl after pulling over a minivan in Cedar City. KSL News Radio's Eric Cabrera reports.
A UHP trooper followed the minivan on I-15 when the driver made a sudden exit without a signal. The officer noticed a child unrestrained moving around in the back. The driver, Rachel Aponas, alongside passenger Christopher Ruiz, admitted to a methamphetamine pipe in the glove box, prompting a probable cause search leading to a locked cooler with the pills. UHP confirmed total weight was just over 5 pounds. Both are being held without bail in Iron County Jail.
The Utah Highway Patrol confirmed the children inside the minivan were taken into the care of a responsible party. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Several communities around Lewiston, Maine, still being told to shelter in place as police continue the search for the suspect in Wednesday's mass shootings. Alex McMahon is among those remembering the 18 people who were killed.
People mourn in different ways, so a lot of people are mourning differently, and for me, I want to be here doing something for my community to try to uplift everybody.
Police have extended their search for Robert Card to the river passing near the town as well as the woods surrounding it. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading today down 366 points. The NASDAQ was up 47 points. The S&P 500 down 19. And our KSL weather, boy, it's turned chilly. We'll have more on that just ahead. KSL News Time, 2:32.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Nothing slows my little girl down, except a stuffy nose.
Mommy.
That's why I use Sinex Children's Saline from Vicks. Sinex instantly clears mucus in everyday stuffy little noses with a gentle, ultra-fine mist designed for kids. Just Sinex? Breathe. Her stuffy nose is gone for now. And so is she.
Sinex Children's Saline. Sinex, breathe. Use as directed, keep out of reach of children.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing, we've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that, meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma? Yep, switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees. Ooma. Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
This is the lunch rush at your local deli. Orders are flying in. Online, on the phone, and in person.
Order for Nick.
So is it possible that fast internet could help your business outrun the rush? It is with Comcast Business. Up-leveling your speed with gig speed Wi-Fi, powering all your devices, and fast downloads and uploads, powered by the next generation 10G network. With Comcast Business, next level speed isn't just possible, it's happening. Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
Get started with fast speeds and advanced security for $59.99 a month for 12 months with a 2-year agreement. Plus, ask how to get an $800 prepaid card with a qualifying internet bundle. Call or go online to learn more. Ends 11/12/2023. Restrictions apply. Requires paperless billing and automatic payments. New 50 megabits per second internet and Security Edge customers only. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. After 12 months, regular rates apply. Gig Wi-Fi requires gig internet and compatible router.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
A vehicle fire in North Salt Lake is causing delays on northbound Legacy Parkway. It's at about 900 North, blocking a right lane. Also a crash in West Valley. Bangerter at the 201 junction, also blocking a left lane of travel. Expect some backups. How do you know if you're getting the best deal on employee benefits? You don't unless you get free quotes from every insurance company every year. Visit shopmyplan.com to get free quotes. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, chilly with the north breeze coming in for the weekend. Today's high 54, but tomorrow only 46. Lows dip into the 20s on Sunday and Monday. Right now, sunny and 52 degrees. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We're continuing our roundup today, and this time we're going to look at some of the big stories you may have missed on this show this week. And in particular, we want to look at some of the stories that have kept me thinking throughout the rest of the day. It is one of the things that I do love most about doing this with all of you every day, and that is what I learn. Things that I had not thought about, angles I had not considered, people who challenge my thinking, my understanding, my perception, and give me a new way to look at things. And so I want to go back to a couple of the interviews that we've had this week as part of this roundup segment of the program for a Friday, to look at some of those that really got me thinking different in terms of the news I had been consuming, the way I had been looking at the world or the problems of the world or the opportunities of the world. And we just love having great thinkers on this show. So I want to go back to a few of those. First, I want to go to the country of Qatar. Qatar has become the intermediary in a really fascinating way between Israel and Hamas, and including the United States when it comes to negotiating for the release of hostages. And on the surface, that seems like something to cheer for. That's a great thing. There's much more to the story. We had Michael Rubin join us from the American Enterprise Institute, and he told me why Qatar has actually found its way into this position and why it's actually pretty controversial.
Well, Qatar is like a polyp on the side of the Persian Gulf, but it's a polyp that has some of the world's largest gas reserves, and that's made it fantastically rich. Now, if you're a country that has basically been made out of whole cloth, you don't have a historical legacy, and suddenly you find yourself one of the world's richest countries, how do you make your mark? The way Qatar decided to do this was to sort of be at the forefront of financing a lot of movements that are on the line of being defined terrorist movements. And at the same time, like an arsonist who moonlights as a forest fighter, they will tell many Western governments that, you know, you can use our connections in order to negotiate with these guys. And so this is the situation we're in now. Qatar is Hamas's banker alongside Turkey. And at the same time, now that Hamas is at the center of the crisis with these hostages, Qatar is saying, instead of penalizing us, instead of sanctioning us, instead of telling us to kick out the Hamas leadership from luxury villas in our country, why don't you just use us to negotiate with them?
Fascinating stuff. Michael Rubin is so smart. And in a lot of ways, Qatar is an arsonist who is also playing the role of firefighter because they have those relationships. And as Michael described it, this really was a think again moment for me, was that rather than saying, oh, yay, we have someone to negotiate for hostages, Qatar is really saying, don't penalize us because most of the Hamas leaders live in very nice places in Qatar. Their bank accounts are in Qatar. And so rather than the United States putting sanctions on Qatar or inflicting some penalties because of their relationship with Hamas, Qatar is saying, hey, we can help you. We can help with the hostages. Now, we want the release of the hostages. Make no mistake about it. We also have to be very careful in terms of rewarding bad behavior or celebrating an arsonist who's doubling as a firefighter. That was a think again moment for me this week from Michael Rubin from American Enterprise Institute. Lots of things, a lot of complexities, a lot of interconnectedness when it comes to the Middle East. We also had Representative John Curtis really gave us a behind-the-curtains look at what was happening this week in the race to replace when it comes to the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And just moments, literally moments after Mike Johnson from Louisiana won the gavel, became the Speaker of the House, John Curtis stepped outside and gave us the reason why he thought Mike Johnson was able to unite the conference after it seemed like there was absolutely no hope.
It started with a real low when Tom Emmer was selected as the Speaker designee, and I sat and listened to my colleagues say I could never vote for him, and then they would list a vote he had taken 3 years ago and say, because of that vote, I could never vote for you. I literally heard one of my colleagues say, I can't vote for you because you certified the election. And it seemed like a real low point, that people were becoming ridiculous. And imagine finding somebody who had never taken a vote that somebody in the Republican conference didn't agree with. And if that had become our standard, it was just a really bad place to be. And then I'll call it the Mike Johnson magic, Magic Johnson, is that he was able to take that climate in only a couple of hours and secure a unanimous vote, something no one would have predicted could happen. And I'm glad you mentioned his speech, because I think if people want to know how he did that, they need to listen to his speech, because some of that magic is in that speech, in his ability to articulate principles that connect with people and build trust. And that's what he did. He was able to build trust with 217 people in very short order where there was no trust.
That's some really great behind the scenes, in the room where it happened moments coming there from Representative John Curtis. And it really was that speech by Mike Johnson and him laying out not just a grievance list, but a specific plan that ultimately united the conference and ended the drama around the speakership. Also want to go to Tanya Snyder, a reporter from Politico. She came on the program this week as a portion of the United Auto Workers strike looks like it's on the verge of being solved. And what role President Biden played in terms of moving that forward and what it might mean.
The leadership of the union really made this happen. And of course, the workers on the picket lines made this happen. But the president, by being so clearly on the union side, has really given them the moral support and given the workers the moral support, kind of just knowing that the administration is on their side. And it helps also for the industry to know, as they're looking for federal grants, as they're looking for tax incentives, as they're looking for anything from the federal government, just knowing that this is a president that really has thrown his support behind the working people, behind the union movement, and that they're going to need to play nice with labor if they want to have a good relationship with the administration. I'm not saying that President Biden has given ultimatums like that to anyone, but I do think that the automakers know that this is a president that is going to look kindly on companies that work well with their workers.
Again, great perspective from Tanya Snyder, who joined us earlier in the week, and a lot of ramifications as it relates to the United Auto Workers strike, what that will mean for Ford, what if the other two big automakers come along, and also what that will mean in terms of electric vehicles and some of those things, as well as the price that ultimately gets passed on to you as the consumer. So all of those things played out, and again, Tanya got me thinking a little different in terms of the role the president had played, how he had created space. He didn't push the policy, but he created space for a different kind of dialogue, and that was fascinating to me. And then I want to round this out with perhaps one of my favorite moments of the week. I had the opportunity to speak with Norman Hill. Now, Norman Hill was National Program Director for the Congress of Racial Equality, and he was the staff coordinator for the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. He and his wife met for the first time in Chicago as they were trying to have a racially integrated party at a beach. And they went on to tag team together in many really challenging moments and situations as part of that civil rights movement. They have put together their memoir, and it's called Climbing the Rough Side of the Mountain. And I have been thinking about that title alone. It comes from an old spiritual, and here's Norman describing why he chose that as the title and theme for their story.
Climbing the Rough Side of the Mountain is from a Negro spiritual and reflects the fact that it is not possible to climb the smooth side of the mountain because there's nothing to hold on to. But climbing the rough side, there are things to hold on to, and it is possible to make it up the mountain. And we find that symbolically for us, climbing the rough side of the mountain means holding on to certain operating principles that we have been shared by our mentor, A. Philip Randolph, who was the nation's greatest black labor leader. Climbing the rough side of the mountain means that we are committed to a society in which racial equality and economic justice would prevail. We believe that pursuing racial equality and economic justice should be done by adopting a majoritarian strategy involving coalition politics. We believe that any group that is mistreated or oppressed should take the initiative to challenge the unfair status quo in which they find themselves. We're committed to mass action, the march, the picket line, the boycott, the means by which those who are mistreated, along with their allies, can challenge key decision makers. And above all, we are committed to nonviolence. Nonviolence is an integral part of the direct mass action. And it's those operating principles that we believe provide the means to climb the rough side of the mountain toward racial equality and economic justice.
That was just a pure delight. Norman Hill, again, he's in his 90s now, and an amazing look at that climb, that you can't climb the smooth side of the mountain. You can only climb the rough side of the mountain. And even though it may scrape your hands and scuff your legs, it gives you something to hold on to. It gives you leverage. And then he went on to lay out all of these core principles that enabled them to actually move that movement forward. And it's just one more reason why I love doing this show, because I get to listen to and learn from historic figures like Norman Hill and so many others who come on this show every week to teach us about principles in the context of our history and what's going on around us every day in our society. And we hope that you continue to listen along with us as well. We'll step aside for one last break. We'll come back with some final thoughts on a Friday next on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by two guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company, building high-quality windows for 37 years. Windows. Unlike other companies, they build the windows. They install the windows and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100 or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Hey guys, are you over 30? Let's talk about testosterone and performance. Your testosterone can decline at an average of 1 to 2% a year after you turn 30. And Revive Men's Health have been experts at treating men with low testosterone and ED since 2011. We're the clinic guys come to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their performance. We love what we do and the patients we care for. You can ask our patients. We did, and we have a 99% patient satisfaction rate this year. Our patients even tell us we're more affordable than their insurance deductibles and copays. Let's get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. That's what we do, and we do it really well. Book your T-check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or send us a private message at ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Advertising used to be simple. Your options were radio, TV, newspaper, and let's not forget the yellow pages. Now it seems like a tidal wave of options. Podcast, cable TV, streaming, OTT, CTV, audio networks, smart speakers. On top of that, you need digital marketing for your website along with SEM, SEO, display, video, YouTube, email, and all the social media platforms. Look, you're the expert in your business. Wouldn't it be nice to have an expert to market you? We are Bonneville Salt Lake, the local marketing and media company you know and trust. We reach customers across all digital and social platforms and have the reach of traditional advertising available as well. We find your customer anytime, any place, anywhere on any device here in Utah or anywhere in the world. We work to optimize your results with our in-house local team of experts, providing you with qualified leads, not just impressions. Contact us at aimyourdigital.com for a free consultation, including a complete digital audit with no obligation or cost to you. We are Bonneville Salt Lake. Your success starts at aimyourdigital.com.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. It drove me crazy. It got so bad, I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't concentrate. I absolutely refused to let any of my friends come to our house for any reason. I would have been humiliated if anyone found out how much my dad drank and how loud my mom screamed at him. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful. The only thing that happened is my mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. Her relationship with my dad really changed. I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I wanted to see if I could have a better relationship with my dad. I'm sure glad I did. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-ALANON or go to alanon.org.
2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
She was tear-gassed and beaten.
Images of thousands desperate to escape Taliban oppression filled our news feeds. More than 80,000 Afghans made it to America. But the story didn't end there.
It was very cold. There was no power, no heat.
Who would help our newest neighbors? I'm Andrea Smartin. In Stranger Becomes Neighbor, you'll hear the stories of some remarkable refugees who left their homes and their dreams behind, only to start over from zero.
Their only possession was 3 blankets.
And you'll meet Americans who stepped up to help them.
You want me to come when you deliver your baby.
What can one person do in the face of an international disaster decades in the making? That's Stranger Becomes Neighbor. Find us at kslpodcast.com, follow us on Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, police in Provo have arrested a man accused of leaving a man lying in the street after he was hit and killed early this morning. Second, the Utah Highway Patrol seized 5 pounds of pills laced with fentanyl during a traffic stop near Cedar City. And third, people in the towns around Lewiston, Maine, still being told to shelter in place as police search for the suspect in Wednesday's mass shootings. Right now, 52 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. And as it is a Friday, we want to shift gears just a little bit as we round out the program today and get a few things beyond just the news cycle and what's going on to make sure we're actually connecting with each other, because that is actually what it's all about. I had the opportunity this week to sit down with our friends at Studio 5, and always fun to sit down with Brooke Walker. And this week I actually got to sit down with Dalen Dove, who was sitting in, guest hosting for Brooke as she was out. And we had this conversation about the art of following up. And it's a unique skill set, and it's one that I think we've lost in the race and chase of the world that we live in. So few people are really good at the art of the follow-up. And so I had a chance to sit down with Dalen on KSL5 TV on Studio 5 and talk about some of these things I think are really important in terms of our interconnectedness, things that really do make a difference. We've talked about it on this show before, about just the art of being present and being able to really be fully present for those that we're interacting with, that we're not looking at our phones or our watches or our screens or what's coming up next, but just learning to step back, to slow down, to exhale just a little bit. And to me, part of that is learning the real art, which is being quick to observe. David A. Bednar, an apostle in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has always talked about this idea of being quick to observe. And I want to look at a unique application of that. So sometimes you can be quick to observe by just noticing a colleague in the hallway that maybe it looks like they're not having a super great day. That is an opportunity for a connection, an interconnection, and making a difference. You may be scrolling through your social media feed, and you may notice that maybe a friend has been ill, or maybe they've been dealing with a sick family member. That's an opportunity to be quick to observe. Or maybe they've got a daughter or a son who's in the school play or has done some achievement. That's an opportunity for an interaction. But you just have to be quick to observe, to see what's going on around you, to what's going on in other people's lives, and then doing something about it. And when we observe people and really observe them, I think as David Brooks has taught us, that it's being seen, deeply seen, and seeing others deeply. That's the real magic of all of this thing that we call humanity. And so being quick to observe is part of kind of the precursor to being good at the art of the follow-up. I often talk about the art of the handwritten note, and putting yourself on paper, I think, is, again, another lost art in our fast-paced world. The digital is fine. The digital can be good. It can be very efficient. But if you want to be really effective, a handwritten note can go a long, long way. In fact, I've noted that my son Will has taken this to a whole new level. He actually has a wax stamp with his initials on it. So when he sends a handwritten letter, people know they're getting something unique in the mail. And it's just that ability to stop, to be present, to be aware, and then to take the time. It doesn't take a lot of time, but just take the time. To do a handwritten letter can have such an impact and be such a game changer for other people. I think one of the other real elements that we talked about on Studio 5 this week was the art of the follow-up question, also becoming a lost art because none of us are really listening very well anymore. And so we kind of listen to the other person to the point they stop so that we can start talking again. The people I've observed that are really good are the ones who can ask very articulate, very insightful follow-up questions. And the message that send is so important. Because when you ask a really good, really specific, really detailed follow-up question, it lets the other person know, I'm really listening. What you're saying matters to me. What you're saying is adding value to me. It's making me think differently. And so much so, I'm going to ask you a good follow-up question. And so that can be a real difference maker for you as well. And then finally, this was the challenge that I gave everyone as I sat down with guest host Dalen Dove, is to scroll different. Now, there are very few times that I throw out a triple dog dare challenge, but this is my triple dog dare challenge for the weekend. And that is for you to scroll different. So the next time you find yourself reaching for your phone or for your digital device, and you're about to either scroll through your social media feed or you're going to go scroll through your favorite news website, I want you to stop and scroll different. And here's the challenge. Rather than going to your social or news feed, I want you to go to your contact list and scroll. And I guarantee you, if you will scroll through there, a name will pop up. It may be someone you saw earlier in the day. It may be someone you haven't seen for months or even years. And then I want you to act and just send that person a text and say, you popped up on my screen today, or I'm thinking about you right now. And just share something very simple. And so it's not a big challenge. It's not a hard challenge. But I guarantee you, if you'll do that, just scroll through your